Welcome, friends. This is your weekly live show delivered by the Barricade. I am your host, Boyan Stanislavski. With me today is Maria Cernat, just as usual. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you for having me, Boyan. Great to be again on the show.
That's right. So today, pretty much as every week, we're going to bring a new portion of some, slightly, on the one hand, horrific, on the other hand, slightly humoristic elements or processes that, occur in the realities that we live in and that we are forced to endure. And today I'd like to start with Romania, particularly because there's a clear political factor. Local elections, right, took place. And I'd like to ask you, Maria, what's the meaning of those elections? What are the most important elements, or maybe important in a way? What are you going to remember from this, local elections?
These local elections, we are going to remember that all the discussion was on moral terms and not political terms. What do I mean by that? That was, again, a ritualistic attempt from the right-wingers, extreme right-wingers, to kill the horrible leftist political party, the Social Democrats, who are right-wingers themselves. So it was some sort of political theater where you had right-wingers fighting with other right-wingers, but the first ones claimed that the second ones were some sort of leftist disease that they have to fight with. They associate leftists and social democrats, the Social Democratic Party, with corruption, with the destruction of the country. And now they will come and they will rescue us again. Even though they are governing the country, they are still somehow in opposition and they are still somehow oppressed by the Social Democrats. So the Romanian politics for quite a while has this appearance of a ritual where we kill the vampire over and over again, and the vampire is the socialist, the Social Democrats. And this is, again, another forces that is the Social Democrats. And I think I explained over and over again how they are. Remember here that the current mayor of Athens, she donated huge amounts of money for building the Cathedral of National Redemption. This is how it is called. And she also supported the referendum for the family, and she's a vivid and convinced true believer. She's an Orthodox, and she displays her beliefs with she has no problem in displaying and showing that she's an Orthodox true believers. So
okay, but then
we basically have the right ideology, and this led us to corruption. The debates were more heated than ever. The society is extremely polarized, and the problem is that the whole discussion is on moral terms. What do I mean by that? We have the morally bankrupt, the corrupt Social Democrats on one hand, and now we are going to come up with new people that are going to save us. So we have the Social Democrats, then we have the National liberal party that is currently, why do they feel so oppressed? They have a majority in the parliament and they can pass laws. I don't know where this oppression from the social democrats comes from, but this is a rhetorical theme that they use over and over again, that we must defeat. And then we have unions. It's new, but it's of right-wing ideology. Even though they discuss things like poverty, even though they have some people that you might think would, a lot of members that are very prone to extreme neoliberal policies, even though they are not so prone in supporting the Orthodox Church like the Social Democrats, they are hardcore neoliberals. They want to privatize everything, to them, creating a business-friendly environment in the city is the main goal, creating a very friendly environment with the IT industry is their main goal, and so on and so forth. So you basically have social democrats that are right-wing in terms of cultural values, and that gave something and raised wages and are a milder version of neoliberalism in terms of economy. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, you have the Union Save Romania, that is not so conservative in cultural terms, in cultural values and what they support, but are hardcore neoliberals that want to privatize everything. So
yeah, okay, so that
national liberals are in between, but they are also very prone to the idea that we must support the business environment, and they have this cult of the business environment. Look, and so I will tell you more about the Bucharest and what's happening here if you want. But
yeah, sure. But before you switch to Bucharest, I'd like to ask a couple of questions to, I mean, you obviously raised a couple of pretty important points, or at least, you know, points that deserve some more attention and discussion. But I just want to mention perhaps two. The one thing which made an impression on me is that they are constantly oppressed. You said that, and this is how the right wing perceive themselves in this political architecture that they have actually designed, that was designed for them. They still feel oppressed somehow, and of course, they feel oppressed by, in your case, the Social Democrats, who are supposed to be associated with, you know, communism, whatever, you know, socialism, all these, you know, red scare in general, right? And this is something that, you know, it just struck me. I think we should give it some sort of name. It's and because it has this Romanian context that you're explaining, I think we should call it something like Dracula politics or something like this, because this is really, that's got to do with vampires, and they are still, you know, trying to suck blood out of everything that has happened long ago and is not around and has not been around for the last, I don't know, 2-3 decades, right? So this is very typical, and I think it's not only about Romania. It's also in Bulgaria. It's also in Poland. It's pretty much throughout Eastern Europe, because the right wing, you know, the people who are today in the right wing parties, now be it neoliberal or nationalist or whatever, but in the right, you know, the right wing mainstream, in most cases was formed by, through, and with people who used to be a part of the old regime. I mean, especially if you look to places like Bulgaria, you will see that all the leading right-wing politicians, they used to be members of the, you know, Bulgarian Communist Party before 1989. So, you know, for me, it's something psychological. It's something in their head, in a way that they cannot detach themselves from, you know, their own individual past. And now they are sort of projecting it into the world of politics, and every failure, because their political life has been, in terms of what we have to endure, in terms of what they brought, like as a public, general economic and social and cultural order, this is like a failure after a failure every step of the way. And of course, that has to do with neoliberalism, because that's part, and that's our Eastern European, I would say, Eastern European peculiarity about it, because neoliberalism, which is the ideology they recognized as their own in the beginning of the 90s, I'm talking about the Eastern European right, and it has failed globally, everywhere, like from the United States to to Europe, everywhere, and it failed on all levels. And in our case, it's just it has this Eastern European peculiarities. You're going to have this weird people who double down on that, like your Union Save Romania, who want to privatize. They want to keep privatizing. Like, is there anything that hasn't been privatized yet, like except for the air, the water, I don't know what else, right? And they still want to privatize, and they are never, it's like privatization is something that it's never enough of privatization, okay? I mean, you can always have more. And the same goes for things like, they like to call it decommunization, like, for example, the changing the names of the streets, or I don't know, destroying some monuments and stuff like that. It's never enough. And I have the feeling that this is, their problem, like of the right. Same goes for corruption. Corruption, particularly about, when we speak about Romania and Bulgaria, then corruption is the first thing that is always brought up. Okay, like, and yeah, of course there is corruption, but then the understanding of the right, especially, I mean, I'm not even talking about politicians. I'm talking about people who are, often sort of very supportive of this anti-corruption, rule of law and all the rest of it. That's of course good to have as little corruption as possible and as much rule of law as possible. But this understanding that things are or would have been all right had it not been for the corruption is so utterly wrong, and displays so much, I don't know, lack of understanding of material reality, because it's not that the corruption is a problem in a well-functioning system. It's that the corruption is a symptom of a system that was designed in a way that in our circumstances produces corruption. And the system is absolutely and totally rotten. And if we take the corruption away, it's not going to change anything in terms of, lives of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me explain what happened on Facebook in terms of the electoral debate. There was a very interesting campaign that was led by one of the main Roma activists here in Romania, Valeriu Nicolae, who I remember, I don't know if I told you or not, but what he did was that he took the CVs of most of the parliamentary members of the parliament coming from the Social Democrats and coming from the Liberal Party, and he showed just how corrupt they are. How? Well, there you could see people 2 years old and then having that were quite shocking. I mean, I was shocked. I mean, I knew these people were frauds, and I knew the system, the educational system, has flaws. And I remember even I was pressured at some point to give a passing grade to somebody who came from politics, and if I didn't want that, I would suffer some pretty negative consequences. So I knew these people were frauds and they were unbelievably corrupt, but to that level of corruption. But it's not the problem here. There are two problems. First, you are not going to solve anything by putting new people there. because the system is going to reproduce itself with new people. And the second one, it is not only a problem of theirs, it is a problem of our whole educational system. How on earth are we allowing people to graduate from high school at 42 and then in a couple of years become PhD and graduate from several master's programs just like that? And master's programs that were located in different universities in different parts of our country. How were these people able to do that? So it is a problem that screams that the system is rotten. Still, we want to replace those people with the competent people in the Union Save Romania. Of course, in the Union Save Romania, as I remember, I told you, there are people who are our age, and most of them have solid careers and are not frauds, but that doesn't make them less prone to corruption.
Yeah, give them time.
Give them time. And they simply represent maybe some corporate interests, and they are more glamorous, but you know, this whole system of corruption is not going to go away once you replace the bad people with the good people. I mean, Philip Zimbardo, I will highly recommend this specialist in social psychology. He is also famous for the 1971 Stanford Prison Experiment and writing a lot of books. He was the one that was asked to come and testify when the Abu Ghraib horror stories about the detainees, Iraqi detainees tortured by American soldiers appeared, and it was a trial. And he was the one that was discussing paradoxically on behalf of the American soldiers, trying to explain, look, you are punishing these people, but the problem is the system. Look at the system. And this is what happened. This was the main topic. And then the main topic was also that Gabriela Firea is stupid, that she is corrupt, that she represents corruption, that she has horrible taste in furniture. They even posted pictures with her living room saying look how tacky this is. And it was tacky, of course, but that was not the point. We are discussing the candidates' living room. How about the bathroom or the wardrobe? What is this? I mean, this level of discussing politics, it is almost unbearable. It
Obviously,
has
it's not
nothing to
politics
do
anymore.
with me as a citizen. How is that the fact that she has very bad taste in furniture, and she chose the most tacky things to decorate her apartment is going to impact on me? Because you may have somebody who's a very classy person and do some very crazy things. I mean, let's remember that Hitler liked Wagner. So the personal tastes are not an indication of the political competence. I mean, what are we discussing here? And this was the level, unfortunately. To tell you the truth, I personally like this candidate of the right-wingers, Nicu Șordan, as a person and morally. But I could never support somebody that would do in a very honest and dedicated manner some things that I politically despise. And let me explain what I'm talking about. I listened to a couple of his discourses. He has a cult of the business environment. I kid you not. He had a discourse where in 20 minutes, he said the word business like 20 times. Like it was, and let's create a business-friendly environment, and we must connect the universities to the businesses and help them find how we should divorce the ideals and objectives of universities from the markets and business imperatives. So how could I support that? You know?
Yeah.
While the other ones have a pretty bad record in terms of what they did, a bridge that leads nowhere. It leads to a field where there's nothing else. And you have to go about, and she actually inaugurated saying that, look, this is a great achievement. I mean, speaking of old times, I think before 1989, she would have been condemned by sabotaging the economy. And because this is unbelievable. How could you inaugurate a bridge that leads to nowhere?
Yeah.
And say, look, this is so great that we have it. And
yeah, well, but
so
in general,
this is
you think, yeah.
the main problem with our politics here in Romania.
Well, the main
And,
problem with your politics seems to be the fact that there is no politics. I mean, everything that you explained so far doesn't have to do in any way. I mean, it bears no relation to anything that that lies within the framework of whatever the power, the prerogatives of the local governments. So, like, whatever, you know, the furniture is obviously a completely ridiculous example. The furniture in the kitchen of one of the candidates, or not in the kitchen, whatever, in the living room, one of the candidates. That's absolutely ridiculous. And
living room.
you know, I feel that there's and also this constant reference to corruption. Like, corruption is here, corruption is everywhere, because this is how things are. And this is how things are designed. This is the architecture of the system, that corruption helps a lot. So it's embedded in it as a kind of, as one of the mechanisms. And of course, you can have different levels of that. I don't know where do they source their idea from. That somehow the social democrats are this kind of emanation of you know, corruption, whereas the others aren't. Like, what's the difference? But that's a different topic. So you don't have politics, really. I mean, you have cheap festivals, and that's of course very sad, because when you have no politics, everything, you know, everything starting from Facebook discussions about someone's furniture and ending up wherever you can imagine, in this weird decadent reality, then I think it's particularly difficult for us, like for people who actually do have some kind of political ideas and would like to compete, you know, with our political ideas and with our political concepts and solutions for problems. But, you know, we can't, because there is no place for actual political debate. There's only a place for, you know, discussing. I mean, if you can even call it discussion. I mean, for this laughable things that you explained. So that's of course very sad. But on the other hand, but meanwhile, I should say, you know, okay, there is this pathetic festival of, you know, of cheap performances that are referred to as politics, falsely, but at the same time, you know, pathetic or humoristic as it may be, there are some very dangerous, bad, evil, if you like, things happening in the society. And you were going to speak about something like that. So, you know, perhaps now's the moment.
Well, what happens is that people tend to impose their own beliefs, even though they are representatives of the state. I mean, if somebody is an Orthodox, she may feel entitled to express those beliefs as if the whole ministry she is speaking on behalf of would share her beliefs. Let me explain. A 46-year-old woman died. She had an abortion. and she died. She had an abortion at the private clinic because all the public hospitals refused to help her get access to reproductive rights, saying that there is a pandemic and they are not going to do it, which is partially correct, but is partially motivated. I don't have the data, but I know that there is a Romanian NGO that conducted their research showing that a lot of the doctors just refuse women's access to reproductive rights, claiming they are believers and they believe in God and they don't want to become murderers. Even the Romanian law does not allow that, so they are still doing it. So we don't know in this case whether they refuse the access to reproductive rights based on religion, or whether they just claim it is a pandemic and they don't want to have anything to do with it for whatever reason. But she died, and the journalists asked the spokeswoman of the Ministry of Health what is her opinion on that situation. It's 2020 and women in Romania die due to abortions. And she said, well, it was her choice because the public health ministry supports women giving birth, supports women trying to have babies. It was her choice, basically implying that somehow she was to be blamed. And it was later discovered, I read a comment, I haven't checked out the information, but I read that the woman had some serious health issues that made it imperative that she got access to an abortion. So this idea that if you give birth, well, that's okay, we are for you, we are crying. If not, well, if you have an abortion, that's your choice. So if you die, well, that's it. It's incredible. And this is wrong on so many levels. Just think about it. How can you say something like that when you are the spokeswoman of a public institution that is funded by taxpayers' money who may or may not be Christians or Orthodox or whatever. So you represent the state, a public institution. You cannot say that the state is supporting some religious perspective on how should a woman behave in her private life. So this is what happened. And I found it to be very, very troubling. And I find it the Romanian state fell prey to the Orthodox Church, to the irrational beliefs. And we rank #1 in Europe in terms of religious people. And we pay our clergy, and in some rural areas, just imagine, the priest is the only representative the Romanian state has. Okay.
Well, but it's not really, like, formally speaking, he's not a representative of the Romanian state. It's just that he acquires this role because there is no other institution that is able to reach out to the people where he, yeah, of course. So, well, you know, I know that's, it's actually a bit surprising for me to hear that you have more religious people than Polish have. I don't know, like, I'm not really following all these statistics that closely, but I suppose that it could be possible on the one hand. On the other hand, I want to say that, of course, the Polish priests, they also, you know, they have this role in rural areas or in small towns where they are actually the actual leaders of the community there. And it's very problematic on so many levels. First of all, they shouldn't be. I mean, they should be the leaders of their parish and the people who just, I don't know, attend masses and are some sort of, in a way, active, you know, in the whatever church's life, local church's life, right? And of course, they go beyond that because the force of the cultural context, they have more power than they actually able to have if we look at the legal construction of their positions and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's very problematic, and that's these are the places where there's this Catholic and in your case Orthodox stronghold spots, right? This is where the most dangerous reactionary culture is reproduced, and this is where it's kept in its most offensive form, I would say. And of course, like probably in Romania as well, we've got hundreds of maybe thousands of anecdotes where, you know, the local community would defend a priest that was accused of all kinds of wrongdoings, including sexual molestation of kids and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's all very unfortunate. And then the state bureaucracy succumbing to that culture. Now, you know, if the state bureaucracy does that, then I would say there is a reason for that. And there could be two reasons. One is, of course, that they have no culture of their own. And second, which is like maybe the sub point to what I just said, is that every ruling class needs an ideology, because they can't just do, you know, the management of the capital and the management of power without any sort of you know, rationalization for it, any idea behind it, no matter how fake it could be. But they just gotta have this. And because they were so blank, your bureaucrats, I think that was the easiest way for them to acquire, you know, this what is you know, given, handed over to them by the church, because it seems to be the only ideological the body of ideas that is somehow accepted, because of course the left is not accepted. So you know, what's the other thing? Business and church, right? This is what's available. So of course they have that, and then they reproduce that in this very cheap bureaucratic manner, because you know they are not competent bureaucrats. They are not competent you know, PR man like the spokeswoman you mentioned. They don't know how to do that properly, so they just, you know, do it the way they can, which is very provincial, very you know, offensive to the intelligence of people who actually understand something about public affairs. And that's very unfortunate. But on the other hand, I think it's very symbolic, because this shows where we actually are. I mean, there are some people who are completely blank, who have no idea about anything, who are there just for power and for these bureaucratic prerogatives that they have acquired over time. And they're just going to say some stupid things that they feel they might actually have to say in a situation where they have to explain something that they don't even understand, that they, well, maybe they understand the tragedy of it, but they don't see how they can have any responsibility for it, right? So despite the fact that they are the Ministry of Health, like in the case of this woman that died because of abortion complications. So it's just very, very, you know, sad, and at the same time, I think decadent, because when you have people, and I think we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago, when you have people at the top of your you know, state apparatus who have really no idea about anything, and who will just, you know, repeat some received opinions from here and from there, that, oh, corruption bad, communism bad, whatever, everything's bad, business is good, democracy good, you know, that kind of stuff, then, you know, they will, like, on that, by repeating it, and by, I don't know, in all kinds of forms, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to get exactly to this spot. And while you are going to play this cheap theater, people are going to die because they can't have, like, I don't know, a proper medical procedure, like in the case of this woman, an abortion. And you know, in Poland, the worst element in comparison with Romania is that there is a law, an actual law, where some doctors who are gynecologists can refuse to you know, to provide you with the medical procedure that you require, like, for example, abortion, because they have you know, they have their beliefs and their values and stuff like that. Science clause in the Polish law. So if your conscience doesn't.
Yes, then seeing now that we are somehow competing which church is the worst, and I think at some point we are going to find a solution, but for the moment it seems that what's happening in Poland with the Catholic Church has a flavor of its own. And please tell me more about what happened recently with an art installation that you had.
Yeah, that's a very I'm glad you brought it up, because this is something extremely symbolic, and I think if one dedicates some time to look at it and just try to understand it, even superficially, it will tell you a lot about the state of affairs in Poland today. So there is this institution called the National Museum, one of the institutions that enjoys a lot of authority in the world of art, in the world of culture. And even the fact that it's one of the buildings that survived the Second World War, there are many interesting, symbolic, historic things about it. And of course, it's central institution. It's a central museum to all museums in Poland, it's got some great exhibitions and so on and so forth. Now, it became actually it became controversial, or it appeared as an institution in a center of a scandal, a censorship scandal. I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago. I don't have a very good memory in terms of chronology, but quite recently, it was still, it was like before the parliamentary elections last year, when the management of the museum was instructed to take down, if I remember correctly, two pictures of a famous painter or photographer that somehow they perceived at the time as wrong. And yeah, so I
remember banana scandal, isn't
exactly,
it?
that was the banana scandal. That was the banana scandal, because there was obviously on one of the photographs or paintings or pictures or whatever, I'm sorry, I don't remember that very well at the moment, but it was like she was eating, like there was a woman eating a banana, and like some people that looked at it, and particularly the cultural bureaucracy of Law and Justice, they looked at it and they felt like she's eating the banana in some kind of sexually teasing manner, and they wanted the picture removed. Or was it a set of pictures or something like this? And then it's very stupid, because they produced an effect that was exactly the opposite of what they wanted, and people started gathering in front of the museum's headquarters, and in front of their their building, basically eating bananas, photographing themselves with bananas, and stuff like that. And so instead of actually removing something that they didn't like, they just produced a major scandal, and they, like, everybody saw these pictures. Otherwise, like, it would have been only the people who actually went to the museum, and now, like, the entire internet's done that, has seen that. So so that was already that was a prelude, I would say, to what's happening right now, because this week, actually, at the beginning of that week, they have put a special artistic I don't know, installation, I guess I should say, because what we see there is in the
I want to show the viewers the image.
Oh yeah, show the image. So there's a fountain in the garden in the yard of the ministry. Sorry, not of the ministry, of the museum, of the National Museum. And as you can see, the fountain is now like filled with some sort of reddish liquid. And then there is a sculpture of the Pope John Paul II, holding a black stone as if he's gonna throw it, right? And
red liquid.
Yeah, and there's this red liquid, absolutely. And everybody who saw that were immediately appalled, because this is so gross. I mean, you look at it and you get all associations that are really, I mean, they have nothing to do with art or with anything that could be remotely related to an institution like the National Museum. And tons and tons of memes have been produced in the first 48 hours that, flooded the social media, and everybody started making fun of this because it's the only rational reaction to it. And you look at it and you see something so horrible, so gross, so aesthetically, it really turns you off on every level you can think of. And then, we had a couple of days ago the official opening of that part of the exhibition of the National Museum, and it turns out that the artist that constructed this thing, he named that installation the not the toxic, but the poison spring. And spring not as a season in a year, but spring of water, spring of ideas and stuff like that. So it's a poison spring, and this spring is red, and of course it's red, right? Because it represents, and he said that, okay, expressis verbis, he did say, represents new ideologies, but also new ideologies, not only those that have been recently invented, but also the new ideologies that have preserved, communism, Bolshevism, and now the Pope, so tired, so old, and yet so powerful that he is willing to crush, this particularly poison spring with just throwing a stone. So, like some people had associations in the beginning before we had this press briefing where this artist explained it. They had, like, for example, they thought it's got to do with menstruation, okay? That there's so much blood around, and then, the Pope.
I want to say something. Well, I want to say that I wrote a Facebook post, so I have the proof that I said that this is the meaning. I mean, I realized that this was what he intended to say, that look, this is the symbol of Bolshevism, this is a symbol of communism, but it also is represented like blood. And I was thinking to myself that, look, there's an interesting connection here, because you see an old man trying to fight with life and with the blood. And just imagine what would have happened if the stone would reach that liquid. I mean, his clothes would look like those of a murderer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to tell you that I also had this association. I mean, red is blood. It's everything that you can, that is, biologically, if you like, related to life. Okay, so for me, it was like it's an assault on life, and that life is somehow evil, and that, of course, has it speaks to the Catholic fundamentalist concept that I don't want to even go into details of that because it's so gross. But on the other hand, when you look at it politically and the political context and the political content of this description that artist gave during the press briefing, it's like what? It's a call for what? Stoning socialists? Socialists? Stoning
like we are. I told you we are going to get stoned.
And then new ideologies. When you come to think about new ideologies, now obviously it's supposed to it's a somehow hidden referral to LGBT ideology, of course, because that's how that's what it's. Yeah, so it's like the Pope there, as is a Catholic saint, is like this kind of metaphorical, metaphysical, godly allowance, permission that you get to stone, kill, torture, everything that is related to anything that could be remotely connected to the idea of progress, socialism, communism, whatever, right? And this is so law and justice. I mean, this is what they live with. These are their minds. This is how they operate on a mental level. They just want to see a festival, a theater of violence, and a theater of some sort of threats and symbolic violence against their enemies, against anything that they perceive to be their enemy, and whatever or whoever is their enemy is, of course, at the same time of Poland, of Polishness, of the tradition, of the Catholic tradition in particular, and so on and so forth. And yet, when you come closer, this Pope throwing a stone, you will see that he's made of such a cheap material. I mean, this is like you can scratch it and it falls apart. So, I mean, you know, the stone isn't, it's all fake, you know, it's just for the sake of, you know, imposing the kind of conflicting, weird, you know, cascading, if you like, labyrinth of right-wing imaginations and the meanders of their fantasies, that they just have to have it at any price. And it's not really going to be anything that they want to actually perpetuate. It's just going to be there for the sake of their own somehow mental and psychological fulfillment. And, you know, he's so cheap that he's probably, I mean, the material and the Pope and the stone and everything, it's so cheap that it's probably not going to even last, okay, because of the material that it was produced from. It's not even going to last until the official, you know, end date of the exhibition. So I don't know what they're going to do. And at the same time, it's a call for every possible, you know,
on the leftist. On the leftist.
Yeah, but it's also a call for any group that do something against it. And on one hand, of course, you're going to have the memes in the internet, which is, of course, in effect, completely totally opposite to what they wanted to achieve. But on the other hand, they had people, for example, yesterday trying to, I think they threw in the basin, the fountain there on the red liquid. They threw in a very big plastic duck, okay, that you, like a duck that you use normally on beaches where you know, the kind of things. Okay, it was, so they threw it in and it was floating around, and of course, you know, they had to remove it, like the guards from the museum, they had to remove it. And then there is this it was very difficult to remove it because, you know, they actually had to go through the water, which is the poison spring, in order to take away the duck. And one of the guards, he actually fell into the poison. It fell into the poison spring, and then they took it out, and they had to sort of take away the air which was inside of this plastic, you know, beach toy, because that's what it actually was. And there is a short clip which you can see when the people that have you know, put the duck into the basin, they were recording how the guards are cutting the plastic duck with knives in order to fold it somehow and throw it somewhere. So really so surreal, you know, the poison spring, and then suddenly a plastic beach toy in a form of a yellow duck flows around. Someone takes it from there, but then he loses his walkie-talkie, like an equipment to the poison spring. The duck is taken from the poison spring, but it's killed violently, you know, and you know. And of course, they don't know how to kill plastic ducks, so they're not very competent about it. So it's constantly, and you can see the duck dying while being tortured there, and it's just you know, it's everything about Poland today is there in front of the National Museum in Warsaw. And on the one hand, you feel like, yeah, it's such a ludicrous idea. It's so stupid. It's so cheap. It's such nonsense, and that's true. But on the other hand, it's something that they want. This is how they perceive reality. This is what they consider something satisfying and good. Okay, like, I mean, the powers that be in Poland.
Okay, quite an interesting experience. I can't wait to record it and share it online because I think it's great. What a nice answer to this type of insanity. So thank you